Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed listeners, welcome. Today, we invite you to embark on an unforgettable journey with the storm-swept heart. This is a tale woven with hope, despair, and an unexpected twist that will grip you from the very first word. Before we begin, please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any part of this captivating story. Now, please, lend us your ears. The sterile scent of antiseptic clung to the air, a stark contrast to the vibrant chaos of the city outside. Inside the cavernous waiting room of America's most prestigious hospital, bathed in the anemic glow of fluorescent lights, Lily, a wisp of a 4-year-old, sat perched on an oversized padded chair. Her tiny legs, no thicker than broomsticks, swung a rhythm of anxious innocence, a counterpoint to the hushed, almost funereal silence that permeated the space. Her flaxen hair, shimmering like spun gold, fell across her face, partially obscuring eyes that held a startling, fathomless blue, eyes that held the weight of a world far too heavy for her small shoulders. Her mother Sarah was beyond these doors, locked in a desperate battle within the cold, unforgiving walls of the emergency room. A rare, aggressive heart condition was stealing Sarah's life, beat by agonizing beat. The doctors, weary yet determined, had delivered their grim verdict. Only a heart transplant could offer salvation. But time, that cruel, relentless tyrant, was rapidly running out. Lily, with the boundless, unblemished logic of a child, had overheard hushed conversations about a new heart. In her innocent mind, unburdened by the complexities of life and death, she pictured a benevolent shop, much like the toy store on Main Street, where one could simply walk in and purchase a pristine, beating heart. The harsh, indifferent hum of the hospital's ventilation system seemed to mock her simple dream, a stark reminder of life's brutal fragility. Her gaze, wide and unwavering, swept across the faces of strangers, each etched with their own invisible sorrows. Most were lost in the glow of their phones, or the depths of their own anxieties. But then, her eyes landed on a man, a solitary figure in a dark, impeccably tailored suit, slumped in a chair opposite her. He was Richard Sterling, a name synonymous with power and wealth, a titan of industry whose decisions shaped markets. But now, in this antiseptic purgatory, his face was a canvas of profound fatigue, lines of grief etched around eyes that, despite their weariness, held an undeniable flicker of kindness. He was not here for business. He was here because his world had shattered into a million pieces just days ago when his only son, David, was taken from him in a brutal, senseless accident. David, in a final act of altruism, had been an organ donor, but the paperwork, the final irrevocable decision, lay heavy in his briefcase, a testament to a loss he was not yet ready to fully accept. Consenting to the donation felt like severing the last tangible thread connecting him to his beloved son. A final, agonizing farewell he desperately wished to postpone. Lily, oblivious to the storm raging within him, pushed herself off her seat, her small feet making barely a sound on the polished linoleum. She padded softly towards him, her courage far outweighing her size. "Excuse me, mister." Her voice, a tiny whisper in the cavernous room, was almost swallowed by the oppressive silence. Richard flinched, the unexpected question jarring him from his morose reverie. He had faced down hostile boardrooms, weathered financial crises, and delivered countless eulogies. But this question, delivered by a child who could barely see over the armrest of his chair, left him utterly bewildered. A tight, unfamiliar smile touched his lips, a reflex more than genuine amusement. "Why, what do you need a heart for, little one?" he asked, his voice rougher than he intended. Lily's blue eyes widened, earnest and completely devoid of guile. "I need it for my mommy," she explained, her voice gaining a fragile certainty. "The doctors said my mommy needs a new heart so she won't hurt anymore." A sudden, sharp pain lanced through Richard's own chest, mirroring the one he'd felt for days. He had heard countless pleas for new hearts in hushed hospital corridors, desperate whispers from grieving families. But never before had such a profound, heartbreaking request been articulated by a child, a mere 4 years old, with such innocent conviction. Lily's unwavering gaze, fixed on him with an almost unbearable hope, twisted the knife deeper into his soul, a stark echo of his own son's recent, undeniable absence. The child's simple request laid bare the very core of his current anguish. David's heart, a part of his son, a piece of himself, now held the power to save another. The thought of letting go, even for such a noble cause, felt like another amputation. Yet the purity of Lily's plea was a silent, powerful demand that resonated deep within the chambers of his own storm-swept heart. It was a cruel irony of fate, weaving his deepest grief with a stranger's desperate need, forcing him to confront a decision that would redefine not just his life, but the very meaning of loss and salvation. The fluorescent hum of the hospital seemed to grow louder, amplifying the deafening silence of his dilemma. Richard, still reeling from Lily's innocent plea, gently led the tiny girl away from the immediate vicinity, guiding her to a small, quieter corner of the vast waiting room. He found a small table littered with well-worn children's books and a handful of crayon stubs. Lily, sensing his unspoken need for a moment of quiet reflection, settled down, her small fingers already turning the dog-eared pages of a worn fairy tale. Her absorption, a flickering candle in the encroaching gloom of his own grief, offered him a brief, almost painful reprieve. He watched her, a knot forming in his throat. This child, a complete stranger, yet her plight felt intimately connected to his own recent tragedy. He had built an empire on calculated risks and cold logic, but here, logic offered no solace, no path forward. Only raw, unyielding emotion. He sought out Dr. Evelyn Reed, a woman whose eyes, though tired, held an almost luminous compassion. Her voice, usually calm and measured, was tinged with urgency as she confirmed Sarah's dire condition. "Mr. Sterling, Sarah's heart is failing rapidly. We're talking hours, not days. She's been on the transplant list, but finding a compatible donor with such a rare blood type and tissue match, it's been a monumental challenge." Richard's jaw tightened. He knew about monumental challenges. He lived for them. But this was different. This was life and death, not profit and loss. Then the doctor's words twisted into a cruel cosmic joke. "However, Mr. Sterling, a miracle, or perhaps fate, has intervened. We've identified a highly compatible donor heart. The match is almost perfect. It's your son, David." Mr. Sterling. The air in the sterile hallway seemed to liquefy, making it difficult for Richard to breathe. The world tilted on its axis. David, his son's heart, the very essence of the child he had just lost, now presented as a macabre yet divine solution. It was a staggering blow, a punch to the gut that left him gasping. For days he had battled the haunting specter of David's absence, the agonizing finality of death. He had clutched onto the shred of hope that David's memory could remain untainted by the medical procedures, the cold, clinical reality of organ donation. He had wanted to preserve his son's form, whole, untouched, a silent testament to a life cut tragically short. Now this, David's heart, beating on, perhaps in a stranger. The thought was both repulsive and profoundly compelling. A chasm opened within him, a terrifying void between his overwhelming grief and the undeniable flicker of hope for Sarah. He saw Lily's face flash before his eyes, her wide, trusting blue eyes, her small hand reaching out for her mother's salvation. His son's wish, unspoken yet clear in David's donor registration, echoed in the silent chambers of Richard's own heart. David, always so quick to give, so ready to help. This was David's legacy, a final act of boundless generosity. The decision weighed on him like a gravestone, cold and heavy. But what was the alternative? To let a child lose her mother when he held the key to salvation? He took a ragged breath, the antiseptic scent suddenly metallic on his tongue. If his heart is truly a perfect match, Richard began, his voice hoarse, a raw rasp against the hospital's quiet hum, then yes, I consent. Please save that little girl's mother. The words were agonizing to utter, each syllable tearing at the fabric of his grief, yet a strange sense of solemn purpose settled over him. It was a choice born of both immense pain and an overwhelming, almost spiritual obligation. No sooner had the words left his lips, solidifying an already unbearable reality, than the waiting room door burst open with a startling force. A woman stood framed in the doorway, a whirlwind of disheveled elegance and raw anguish. Her designer coat was askew, her usually meticulously styled blonde hair a wild tempest around a face contorted by grief and fury. This was Elaine, Richard's ex-wife, David's mother. The air instantly crackled with unspoken tension, a silent storm brewing between them. Their divorce, a bitter, protracted affair, had left deep, festering wounds that time had only partially healed. Now, the fresh agony of losing David had ripped those old scars wide open. "Richard," Elaine's voice, sharp and laced with hysteria, sliced through the sterile quiet. Her eyes bloodshot and accusatory, fixed on him like a predator on its prey. "What are you doing? I heard you're going to let them butcher our son." Her voice fractured on the lost word, dissolving into a strangled sob. The word butcher hung in the air, a grotesque echo of her pain and his own unspoken fears. Richard felt a cold dread creep up his spine. This was a battle he had not foreseen, a personal war erupting in the sacred space of a hospital. He tried to approach her, to explain, to offer solace, but she recoiled, her face twisting into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. "Don't you dare touch me," she shrieked, her voice drawing the attention of hushed onlookers, turning curious heads towards their unfolding drama. "How could you even consider this, Richard? After everything, he was our son, our only son." Her words were whips, lashing him, stripping away the thin veneer of composure he had managed to construct. A small whimper drew his attention. Lily, who had been absorbed in her book, now looked up, her blue eyes wide with fear, reflecting the raw, ugly emotions swirling between the adults. Richard felt a pang of guilt. This wasn't a place for a child. This wasn't a place for this kind of raw, public display of grief and animosity. "Elaine, please," he implored, his voice low, desperate. "Not here. Let's talk somewhere else. This isn't—" But Elaine was beyond reason. Her gaze, wild and unseeing, swept past Richard, settling on Lily. The child was small, fair-haired, and clutching a worn teddy bear. In Elaine's grief-stricken mind, a distorted, venomous suspicion began to fester. The presence of this innocent child, combined with Richard's sudden, uncharacteristic act of charity, ignited a spark of irrational jealousy and paranoia. A cruel, almost theatrical sneer twisted her lips. "So this is it, isn't it?" Elaine's voice, though lower, was now laced with a chilling, insidious venom. Her eyes, narrowed slits, reeked over Lily, then back to Richard, a silent accusation burning within their depths. "You've moved on, haven't you, Richard? So quickly. And you're using our son's heart to win favor with your new little family? To impress your new mistress?" Her words were not spoken, but spat, each syllable a poisoned dart aimed directly at his heart. "You want to give David's heart to her? To your new lover? To impress her child?" The accusation hung in the sterile air like a suffocating shroud, sharp and unbearable. Richard felt as if he had been punched in the gut, the wind knocked out of him. The sheer audacity, the cruel illogicality of her words stunned him into silence. His jaw clenched so tight he felt his teeth might shatter. The doctor and nurses who had been observing the escalating scene with growing discomfort now exchanged bewildered, concerned glances. The whisper of Elaine's accusation, though perhaps not fully understood by Lily, pierced the fragile peace of the waiting room. Richard wanted to shout, to roar, to deny the monstrous fabrication, but the words stuck in his throat, choked by a combination of shock, grief, and the bitter residue of their shared, tumultuous past. He was caught in a cruel vortex, his personal agony now made public, his noble, agonizing decision twisted into something sordid and depraved. Lily looked from Elaine's furious face to Richard's stunned, heartbroken one, then back to her coloring book, as if seeking solace in the familiar lines. The innocence of her gaze amplified the ugliness of Elaine's words, creating a stark, almost unbearable contrast. Richard felt a wave of nausea. This was not just about a heart transplant anymore. This was a deeply personal, brutal battlefield fought in the merciless glare of fluorescent lights, with a child as an unwitting, vulnerable pawn. The sheer, unadulterated injustice of it all, the twisting of David's last selfless act into a sordid melodrama made his blood run cold. His mind, usually so sharp and strategic, raced, desperately searching for a way out of this nightmare. But there was no escape. Elaine's accusation, baseless and cruel, had landed like a hand grenade, shattering the already fragile peace of the hospital waiting room and setting the stage for a far more complex and public battle than Richard could have ever imagined. The clock on the wall, indifferent to human suffering, ticked relentlessly, a cold, metallic reminder of Sarah's dwindling time and the growing impossibility of saving her.
Within what felt like mere minutes, the digital wildfire began. The initial whispers of a high-profile organ donation quickly morphed into a raging inferno of public speculation. Millionaire tycoon's disgraced ex accuses him of using dead son's heart for new lover, screamed a headline on a prominent gossip site, its lurid text spreading like a virus across social media platforms. Soon, mainstream media, unable to ignore the viral storm, picked up the story, albeit with a slightly more cautious, yet equally insidious tone. News vans, like predatory beasts, began to descend upon the hospital, their satellite dishes swiveling greedily toward the entrance. Flashes popped, microphones were thrust at bewildered visitors, and the once sacred private space of the hospital was transformed into a chaotic media circus. Richard's phone, a symbol of his power and connection, now became a tormentor, buzzing incessantly with calls from desperate reporters, frantic board members, and even former friends. Each ring was a hammer blow, driving home the reality of his public humiliation. The hospital's administrative staff, besieged by media inquiries and facing a potential PR nightmare, quickly convened an emergency meeting. Dr. Reed, her face etched with exhaustion and frustration, informed Richard of the hospital's ultimatum. Mr. Sterling, we understand this is deeply personal, but the media attention is jeopardizing the entire transplant program. We need a clear, unequivocal consent from both legal guardians. If Mrs. Sterling continues to oppose, or if these accusations aren't publicly refuted, we simply cannot proceed. The integrity of our program and the trust of other donor families is at stake. The subtext was clear. Resolve this, or Sarah would die. Richard felt a cold, crushing weight descend upon him. The fate of Sarah, and by extension Lily's fragile hope, rested on his ability to appease Elaine, a woman consumed by grief and betrayal, now fueled by a twisted narrative. He tried to reach Elaine, but she had retreated, her phone unreachable, barricaded behind her pain and the perverse validation of the media's attention. Meanwhile, the relentless ticking of the clock in Sarah's room seemed to amplify, a death knell in the silence. Her condition, already precarious, began to subtly worsen. Her breaths became shallower, her skin taking on an alarming pallor. She was dimly aware of the commotion outside, the whispered rumors, the strained faces of the nurses. The fragmented words reached her, twisting in her feverish mind. Mistress, David's heart. A wave of shame, irrational yet potent, washed over her, further weakening her already fragile hold on life. She instinctively tried to pull away from the IV lines, a desperate, almost unconscious rejection of a life that felt tainted. Lily, perched on Richard's lap, fidgeted restlessly. "Joy, why are those people taking pictures? Is my mommy getting her new heart? She's hurting, Ju." Her innocence was a sharp contrast to the venom of Elaine's words, a poignant reminder of the pure stakes at play. Richard hugged her tighter, his gaze fixed on the closed doors of Sarah's room, a fortress he might never breach. Desperate, Richard summoned his top legal counsel, Mr. Davies, a man as shrewd as he was discreet. Davies arrived within the hour, his sharp eyes taking in the chaotic scene with professional detachment. He quickly arranged an emergency meeting in a secluded administrative office, a stark utilitarian room with a single unadorned table and a few uncomfortable chairs. Richard and Davies waited. The tension was a palpable entity in the room, thick enough to choke on.
Elaine finally arrived, escorted by a stern-faced security guard, her eyes still burning with resentment. She avoided Richard's gaze, her jaw set in a rigid line of defiance. Her pain was a tangible force, a swirling vortex that consumed her and threatened to pull everyone into its depths. For her, this wasn't just about David's heart. It was about the final, agonizing wound of their broken marriage, exposed and festering under the harsh glare of public scrutiny. The accusation of him having a mistress was a shield, a desperate attempt to explain away his inexplicable betrayal in her grief-addled mind. "Elaine," Richard began, his voice surprisingly steady, "this has gone too far. The media, your accusations, it's hurting David's legacy, and it's endangering an innocent woman's life." Elaine scoffed, a bitter, humorless sound. "My accusations? You call the truth an accusation, Richard? You found yourself a young and new distraction, and now you want to sacrifice our son for her." She slammed her palm on the table, the sharp crack echoing in the small room. "I will not consent, not to her. I will sue this hospital, Richard, if they even think about touching David." Davies, ever the pragmatist, interjected smoothly. "Mrs. Sterling, with all due respect, while your grief is understandable, legal action will be lengthy and ultimately fruitless. The hospital has a legal right to proceed if one guardian consents and the deceased expressed clear wishes. However, public opinion and the ensuing media storm could cause irreparable damage to everyone involved." He paused, letting his words sink in. More importantly, David's last wish was to help others. This is a chance to honor him, to truly let his spirit live on. Elaine's eyes flickered, a momentary tremor of doubt in their stormy depths. "Honor him?" she spat, her voice thick with unshed tears. "You want to honor him by carving up his body for her?" She pointed vaguely in the direction of Sarah's room. "I demand to see her. I want to look into the eyes of the woman you're sacrificing our son for." Richard's blood ran cold. This was a new, unexpected demand, a horrifying escalation. To bring Sarah, frail and clinging to life, face to face with Elaine's raw animosity, it was unthinkable. "Elaine, she's in critical condition. She's unconscious. You can't." "Oh, so she is here." Elaine's eyes gleamed with a perverse triumph. "And of course, she's unconscious. How convenient. If she's so sick, what does it matter if I see her? Or are you afraid I'll see the truth?" The clock on the wall of the conference room seemed to tick louder, each second a hammer blow. The lead surgeon, a grim-faced woman named Dr. Anya Sharma, burst into the room. "Mr. Sterling, we're losing her. Sarah is deteriorating rapidly. We need a decision now. The fart won't last much longer outside the body." Her words were like a siren, cutting through the emotional fog. Richard looked from Elaine's hardened face to Dr. Sharma's desperate plea. He thought of Lily, her innocent hope. He saw David's smiling face in his mind, heard his son's infectious laugh. David, always so full of life, so eager to give. He had to honor that. He had to make a final, desperate play. "Elaine,"
Richard said, his voice low, firm, cutting through the noise. If you agree, if you truly let David's wish come true, I will do this. I will put every penny I own into establishing a foundation, a David Sterling Memorial Foundation. It will be dedicated to helping children with heart conditions, to funding research, to ensuring no child ever has to ask where they sell hearts again. It will be David's living legacy. His name will not just save one life, it will save hundreds, thousands. This is how we honor him, Elaine. Not by holding on to what's left, but by letting his goodness multiply.
Elaine's breath hitched. The mention of David's legacy, of helping children, of a perpetual monument to their son's life seemed to pierce through the armor of her grief and anger. Her eyes, still filled with tears, softened almost imperceptibly. The media might twist the story, but the truth of such a foundation, a tangible act of boundless compassion in David's name, would be undeniable. The image of Lily, the small, hopeful child, flickered in her mind. David had always loved children. He had dreamed of having his own. A long, agonizing silence stretched, broken only by the frantic beeping of monitors from down the hall, a stark reminder of Sarah's dwindling time. Elaine's shoulders slumped. The rigid defiance in her posture began to crumble. Her lower lip trembled. She looked at Richard, truly looked at him for the first time since David's death, seeing not just the ex-husband who had moved on, but the grieving father who shared her unspeakable pain. A foundation? She whispered, her voice fragile, barely audible. For David? Yes, Elaine, Richard affirmed, his voice gentle now, seeing the crack in her facade. For David. His life, his spirit will live on, saving others forever. After another agonizing moment that stretched into an eternity, Elaine finally, almost imperceptibly, nodded. A single silent tear traced a path down her cheek. A tear of surrender, of acceptance, of a faint, nascent hope. All right, Richard, she choked out, her voice raw with emotion. For David. Only for David. The words were painful, but they were consent. A fragile, hard-won consent. Richard let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He immediately turned to Dr. Sharma, who stood with bated breath. It's a go, doctor. Prepare for the transplant. But before Dr. Sharma could even relay the news, her pager screamed to life, a shrill, urgent sound. Her face, which had just begun to relax, tightened with renewed concern. She glanced at the screen, her brow furrowing deeply. Mr. Sterling, we have another complication. A major winter storm has just hit. Blizzard conditions. The transport team is reporting zero visibility. The heart, it might not make it. Her words were a final, brutal twist of the knife, transforming a hard-won victory into a new, terrifying race against the elements, against time, against fate itself. The storm outside, unseen, but now undeniably present, mirrored the emotional tempest within the hospital walls. The lead surgeon's, Dr. Anya Sharma's, urgent words about the blizzard hit Richard like a physical blow, stripping away the thin veneer of relief he'd just found. Elaine's hard-won consent, a fragile victory wrested from the jaws of grief and bitter accusation, now seemed tragically moot. He saw the weather app on his phone glowing ominously with angry red warnings. Blizzard conditions, travel impossible, state of emergency declared. The city outside, usually a bustling symphony of horns and hurried footsteps, had fallen silent, muffled beneath a rapidly accumulating blanket of snow. This wasn't just a storm, it was an act of cosmic sabotage, mocking his desperate race against time. Richard immediately barked orders into his phone, his voice sharp, authoritative, a stark contrast to his earlier plea. Get me a direct line to the transport team, find an alternative route, a helicopter, an armored vehicle, anything. Money is no object. But even his immense wealth, usually an all-conquering force, seemed helpless against the elemental fury of nature.
The transport coordinator, his voice crockling with static over the phone, sounded grim. "Mr. Sterling, we're doing everything we can. Roads are impassable, whiteout conditions. Even emergency services are struggling. We've got the heart on ice, but its viability window is shrinking with every minute."
As the minutes stretched into an eternity, the news from Sarah's side grew increasingly grim. Dr. Reed appeared, her face pale, her usual composure replaced by a desperate urgency. "Mr. Sterling," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "Sarah's condition, it's deteriorated drastically. Her heart rate is erratic, her blood pressure plummeting. She's in cardiogenic shock. Her organs are beginning to shut down. Even if the heart arrives now, her body might not be strong enough to withstand the trauma of the surgery. We're pushing powerful vasopressors, but she's fading." The ground seemed to crumble beneath Richard's feet. He had fought a battle of wills with Elaine, a battle against public perception, and now he faced the ultimate, insurmountable foe, Sarah's own failing body. He looked at Lily, still clutching her teddy bear, her small face streaked with tears from the earlier confrontation. She was oblivious to the true gravity of the words being exchanged, but she instinctively sensed the rising tide of fear. "Chewie," she whimpered, pulling at his sleeve, her voice trembling. Mommy's tummy hurts. Is she going to be okay?" Richard scooped her into his arms, burying his face in her soft, blonde hair. He couldn't lie to her, not really, but he couldn't tell her the brutal truth either. "We're trying, sweet pea. Everyone is trying very hard." The words felt hollow, inadequate. Just as despair threatened to consume him, his phone rang again. It was the head surgeon from the donor hospital, his voice grave, almost regretful. "Mr. Sterling," he began, without preamble, "I regret to inform you that due to the severe weather conditions and the unforeseen-to-land transport, we've had to reassess the allocation of David's heart." Richard's blood ran cold. He knew what was coming. The nightmare of the second patient. "What do you mean?" he demanded, his voice tight with barely suppressed fury. "We have another recipient," the surgeon continued, apologetic but firm. "A 4-year-old girl, ironically. A critical case. She's in immediate need, and her hospital is geographically closer, less affected by the storm. Her chances of survival without a transplant right now are practically zero. With the viability window of the heart closing and Miss Sarah's current instability, our ethics committee is strongly recommending we divert the organ. It's a matter of maximizing the chance of a successful transplant. We have 2 lives, Mr. Sterling, and only 1 heart, and the other patient is a child, just like the one you're trying to help." The words hit Richard like a physical blow. A 4-year-old girl, just like Lily. The universe, in its cruel irony, was demanding another impossible choice, forcing him into a horrifying ethical dilemma. He had fought so hard, endured so much, only to be presented with this ultimate agonizing test. His son's heart, a beacon of hope, was now a painful symbol of scarcity, of choices no man should ever have to make. David's legacy, now hanging by a thread, could be diverted before it even began. A profound, chilling silence fell over Richard. He looked from his phone to Lily, nestled against his chest, her small body shaking slightly. He thought of Sarah, fading away behind the closed doors. And then he thought of David, his son, smiling face, vibrant and full of life, a memory now tainted by this brutal, unexpected twist. David, who had always hated injustice, who had always championed the underdog. What would David want? "No!" Richard roared into the phone, the sound echoing in the hushed hospital corridor, drawing stares from the few remaining staff and media who hadn't been driven away by the storm. "We have consent. My ex-wife, against all odds, has just given her consent. We have been through hell for this. You cannot just take it away." His voice cracked, raw with desperation.
Mr. Sterling, I understand your anguish, the surgeon replied, his voice laced with professional detachment. But ethically, we must prioritize the highest chance of success. The other child is stable enough for surgery, and she's closer. Every minute counts. But Sarah is also critical. Lily needs her mother, Richard pleaded, abandoning all pretense of composure. The tycoon, the master of negotiation, was reduced to a desperate father, begging for a miracle. Give us a chance, just a little more time. Suddenly, Lily, sensing a shift in Richard's demeanor, the raw agony in his voice, looked up at him. Her eyes, still tear-filled, met his. She reached a tiny hand into his jacket pocket, fumbling until her small fingers closed around a familiar object. It was a framed photo of David, the one Richard always carried. David, smiling broadly, his arm around his beloved golden retriever, Apollo. Lily had seen it before, captivated by the dog. She pulled the photo out, holding it up for Richard to see, then looked at the blurry, snow-filled window. Chuhoy? The little boy in the picture. He's a guardian angel, isn't he? He'll make the snow go away, so Mommy can get his heart, right? Her innocent words, utterly out of context yet piercingly poignant, were like a splash of cold water on Richard's fevered mind. He looked from the photo of David, smiling timelessly, to Lily's trusting gaze. A guardian angel. His son. A wave of clarity washed over him. David wouldn't want another child to suffer. David would want his heart to be used, to save a life, any life, if it meant hope. This wasn't about Sarah anymore. Not entirely. It was about David's spirit, about honoring his selfless wish above all else. But how to do that and still fight for Sarah? His gaze flickered to Elaine, who had been listening to his frantic call, her face a mixture of renewed anger and a dawning understanding. She saw the photo of David in Lily's hand, saw the innocent trust in the child's eyes, and for a fleeting second, her own hardened facade cracked. The memory of David's kindness, his innate desire to help, perhaps even a flicker of shared grief with Richard, softened her gaze. Mr. Sterling, the voice on the phone cut in again, sharper now. We need a definitive answer. We cannot hold the organ indefinitely. The other patient... Richard's mind raced. There was only one chance, one desperate gamble. He made eye contact with Elaine, a silent plea passing between them. He saw a flicker of her old strength buried beneath layers of pain. He knew what he had to do. Doctor, Richard said into the phone, his voice suddenly calm, resolute. I understand the ethical dilemma. You believe the heart might have a better chance with the other child, given Sarah's current instability and the storm. But I assure you, we have secured consent from both guardians, and we are willing to do anything to ensure the heart reaches Sarah. We will mobilize private resources, ground teams, anything necessary. Just give us a few more minutes. Don't divert the heart. Please. He hung up, knowing he had bought himself precious, fleeting moments. He turned to Elaine, his eyes pleading. Elaine, he said, his voice raw with urgency, we need to stand united. For David. For what he would have wanted. This storm, Sarah's condition, the other patient, it's all pushing us to the brink. But we can't give up. Not now. He held out the photo of David to her, Lily still clinging to his side. This is David, Elaine. He wanted to help. Let him help. Let his heart beat on in Sarah. Please. Elaine looked at the photo, then at Lily's trusting face. The image of David, so full of life, standing beside the little girl who embodied pure, innocent hope, seemed to cut through the last vestiges of her bitterness. The absurdity of her earlier accusation against Sarah
magnified by the purity of Lily's presence, now felt distant, foolish. Her son was a hero. His heart was a gift, and if it could save this child's mother, then that was David's true legacy.
"All right, Richard," Elaine finally said, her voice barely a whisper, thick with tears that now flowed freely, tears of sorrow but also of a profound, painful acceptance. "For David." The words, a hard-won truce, a fragile alliance forged in the crucible of shared grief, were barely spoken when Dr. Sharma's voice, strained but triumphant, echoed from the intercom. "Mr. Sterling, Mrs. Sterling, the transport team just radioed in. They found a break in the storm. They're pushing through. ETA, less than 10 minutes, but we have to move fast. Sarah's vitals are dropping again." The battle against the elements was still raging, but a tiny window of opportunity, a fragile thread of hope, had appeared. The race was far from over. It was now a frantic sprint against the clock, against nature's fury, and against Sarah's rapidly fading life. The blizzard howled outside, a wild, untamed beast, but within the hospital a different kind of storm raged, a storm of hope, fear, and the unyielding will to survive. The announcement from Dr. Sharma cuts through the cacophony of the storm and Richard's internal turmoil like a surgeon's scalpel. Less than 10 minutes. The words were a fragile lifeline, yet they also ignited a new, frantic energy. Richard's mind, usually a fortress of logic, was now a whirlwind of prayers and desperate calculations. He clutched Lily Kiter, her small, trusting body, a living reminder of the precious life hanging in the balance. Elaine, her face pale but resolute, stood beside him, a silent sentinel in their shared vigil. The media circus outside, though temporarily subdued by the intensifying blizzard, still cast a long shadow, a constant threat of renewed chaos. The next few minutes were an eternity suspended in the frigid, snow-choked air. Richard made a series of rapid-fire calls, leveraging every ounce of his influence. He pulled strings, bypassed protocols, and offered blank checks, desperate to clear the path for the approaching medical team. He envisioned the transport vehicle, a tiny, defiant speck battling the white fury outside, carrying the most precious cargo imaginable, David's heart. He pictured David himself not as a memory, but as a young hero, his essence encapsulated in that vital organ, fighting its own silent battle against the elements. Then, a new voice, strained but clear, crackled over the hospital intercom. "Transport team entering hospital grounds. Emergency personnel clear the main entrance. Repeat, clear the main entrance." A collective gasp swept through the waiting room. Richard leapt to his feet, pulling Lily with him. Through the snow-streaked windows, he could vaguely make out the powerful headlights of an armored medical transport vehicle, its snow chains grinding against the pavement. It looked like a beast from an ancient myth emerging from the heart of the storm, a harbinger of life. But even as a wave of relief washed over him, a new alarm blared from Sarah's room. "Code Blue, we're losing her. Prepare for immediate intubation." Dr. Reed's voice, raw with desperation, ripped through the hospital's public address system. Richard's heart plummeted. Sarah's body, ravaged by the long wait and the sheer stress, was giving up just as salvation arrived. This was the ultimate betrayal of fate, a cruel twist that felt almost designed to break him. He turned to Lily, whose eyes were now wide with terror, reflecting the chaos around them. Mommy's going away?" she whimpered, her small voice piercing his soul. Elaine, her face etched with a fresh wave of fear, clutched Richard's arm. "Richard, what do we do? We came all this way. David!" Her voice trailed off, lost in the escalating medical urgency. In the midst of the escalating crisis, as nurses and doctors surged towards Sarah's room, a figure emerged from the freshly arrived transport vehicle. It was Dr. Evan Jenkins, the lead transplant surgeon from the donor hospital, a man known for his calm under pressure. He carried the cooler, almost reverently, a fragile casket holding the promise of life. His eyes, though tired, held a spark of grim determination. "Dr. Sharma, the heart is here," Dr. Jenkins called out, his voice cutting through the din. Dr. Sharma, already prepping for emergency measures in Sarah's room, looked up, her gaze fraught with a terrible dilemma. "Dr. Jenkins, we have a problem. Sarah's unstable. We may not be able to proceed. Her body won't tolerate the shock of surgery." The tension in the air became almost unbearable. Richard, caught between the arrival of his son's heart and the terrifying instability of Sarah's condition, felt a surge of adrenaline. He remembered Lily's earlier words, her innocent faith in guardian angels. He took a deep breath, his mind clearing with a strange, fierce resolve. He stepped forward, addressing both Dr. Sharma and Dr. Jenkins. "Doctors, you must try. We have come too far. David's heart, it must save her. Lily needs her mother, and David wanted to help." His voice, though strained, held an unyielding conviction. Dr. Jenkins, after a moment of hesitation, met Richard's gaze. He saw not just a desperate father, but a man who had faced his ultimate grief and still fought for another. He nodded. "We will do everything humanly possible, Mr. Sterling, but the risks are astronomical." The operating room doors swung open, revealing a flurry of activity. Sarah was wheeled in, a pale, almost ethereal figure, her life hanging by a thread. Lily, seeing her mother's still form, let out a heart-wrenching sob. "Mommy!" she cried, trying to break free from Richard's grasp. "It's okay, sweet pea. Mommy's going to get her new heart now. David's heart." He looked at Elaine, who was now weeping silently, her face buried in her hands. The public spectacle, the accusations, the anger, all had faded into insignificance, replaced by the raw, universal fear of loss. Hours stretched into an eternity. The blizzard outside intensified, coating the hospital in an ethereal blanket of white, muffling the world. Inside, the sterile silence of the waiting room was punctuated only by the rhythmic beeping of monitors from deep within the surgical suite, a fragile symphony of life and death. Lily, exhausted by the emotional roller coaster, finally fell asleep on Richard's lap, her small hand clutching his. Richard sat motionless, his gaze fixed on the double doors of the operating room, a silent sentinel in the lonely vigil. Elaine, having composed herself, now sat beside him, their shoulders almost touching, a tenuous truce forged in the crucible of shared anxiety. They were two broken individuals, united by a son lost and a hope desperately sought. Then, after what felt like an endless night, the surgical light above the doors flickered off. The doors slowly swung open. Dr. Sharma emerged, her surgical mask pulled down, revealing a tired but triumphant smile. Her eyes, though weary, shone with a profound relief. "The surgery was successful," she announced, her voice hoarse but clear. "Sarah has a new heart. It was incredibly difficult. She coded twice on the table, and the tissue compatibility was even more complex than we anticipated. But David's heart, it's strong. It's beating beautifully." A wave of profound, overwhelming relief washed over Richard. He felt his knees buckle. Lily scurried in his arms, blinking awake, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Elaine let out a choked sob, tears of pure, unadulterated relief streaming down her face. She reached out, grasping Richard's hand, a silent acknowledgement of their shared miracle. Weeks later, Sarah made a miraculous recovery. She was weak, but alive. Her first conscious memory was of Lily's face, bright as a sunrise, whispering, "Mommy, your new heart is singing." The day Sarah met Richard and Elaine was charged with a complex blend of gratitude, sorrow, and awkwardness. Sarah, now fully aware of the extraordinary circumstances surrounding her transplant, especially Elaine's initial resistance and David's ultimate sacrifice, wept openly. I don't know how to thank you," she whispered to Richard, then turned to Elaine, her voice thick with emotion. "And you, Elaine, your son, he saved my life. I am so incredibly sorry for any pain my presence has caused you." Elaine, for the first time, truly looked at Sarah. She saw not a rival, not a mistress, but a fragile woman, a mother, whose eyes held a flicker of David's vibrant energy. She saw Lily playing happily nearby, a child who would now have her mother because of David. The anger, the bitterness, the unfounded suspicions all seemed to dissipate like smoke in the wind. "No," Elaine said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for giving David's heart a place to keep beating, for letting his spirit live on." A fragile smile, tinged with a lingering sadness, but also a newfound peace, touched her lips. In the years that followed, the David Sterling Memorial Foundation blossomed into a beacon of hope, far exceeding Richard's initial vision. Funded by Richard's immense wealth and tirelessly championed by both him and Elaine, it became a national force, helping hundreds of children with critical heart conditions receive life-saving transplants. It funded cutting-edge research, established a network for donor families, and campaigned tirelessly for organ donation awareness, ensuring David's name was synonymous with profound compassion. Lily grew up healthy and vibrant, a testament to the miracle she had received. She often visited Richard and Elaine, bringing them crayon drawings and tales of her adventures, bridging the divide between two families forever linked by a heart. Richard and Elaine, though never rekindling their marriage, found a profound, unexpected peace in their shared mission, their grief transmuted into a powerful force for good. The story of the storm-swept heart, a tale of a child's innocent wish, a millionaire's painful choice, a mother's bitter accusation, a body's betrayal, and a heroic battle against nature's fury, became a legend within the medical community. It served as a powerful reminder that even in the darkest blizzards of life, human connection, forgiveness, and the unyielding power of love can forge miracles. And every time Lily hugged her mother, she could feel the steady rhythm of a heart that was not just a biological organ, but an eternal symbol of sacrifice, hope, and the unbreakable bonds that tie us all together, beating silently, perpetually, underneath the storm. Dear listeners, thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through the storm-swept heart. We hope this story of resilience, sacrifice, and the boundless power of human connection has touched your own hearts. It reminds us that even in our deepest sorrow, there lies an opportunity for profound good, and that true healing often begins with an act of selfless love. Please share your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. Hit that like button, subscribe to our channel for more stories that move you, and share this tale with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you.